Welcome to our weekly discussion of all things current in California politics. I'm Walt Gray. Joining us this week, reporter Emily Hoeven, political expert for CalMatters.org. Emily, always good to have you here on the program. So the new session at the State House begins the 4th of January. Once they get back into session, what's top of mind for the legislature?
I think that's something that's sort of hanging over their head and that they're going to address in this special session that's going to be running at the exact same time as the regular session is this gas penalty that the governor wants to enact on oil refiners that he accuses of price gouging Californians at the pump. So I think that is definitely the big ticket item. It's going to be the most controversial, get the most attention. But within the regular session, lawmakers have already introduced some climate bills and there have already been some discussions about further expanding abortion rights from the Women's Caucus. And so I think those are going to be some of the big ticket items we're going to see this upcoming weeks.
Okay, my next question I've written carefully, and I'm going to ask you word for word. Do you think California would be more politically inclusive if there were more checks and balances, more differing political viewpoints and opinions?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think after this election in November, we saw that Democrats continue to control about 75% of seats in both the state assembly and the state senate. And so what that supermajority means in practical terms is that they do not need a single Republican vote to pass a bill, even a tax hike, or to pass the state budget. And so, I think a lot of Republicans in the legislature feel that that effectively, marginalizes them. Their opinions Democrats don't have to listen to their points of view because it doesn't actually matter practically. And so I think, we saw that in the election when Lon He-Chen was running for controller and he was a Republican candidate that was sort of seen as having the best chance of winning. And he said, I want to be this check on all of these Democratic officials. But the fact of the matter is that California keeps electing that same proportion of Democrats. So that, that's sort of the will of the voters.
It is. It is the will of the voters. That's true. Governor Newsom made a trip to the border this week down to see what was happening there. He had some strong comments directed at Democrats and the federal government.
He did. I think his trip to the border was very interesting because he's one of the highest profile Democrats to really go down there in recent months. And it's obviously always been a very explosive federal issue. And so, of course, the rumblings are starting back up again as to whether he's considering a possible presidential run. But he did have some very interesting comments. He basically said California does more to address the immigration crisis and help migrants crossing the border with health care and things like that than any other state. And because of that, the federal government keeps sending us, planes and buses full of immigrants. And he said, we want to help. At the end of the day, we're facing a possible budget shortfall this upcoming year of $25 billion. And we can't be expected to keep shouldering this if the federal government is not stepping in and helping. So definitely pretty incendiary, I think, at both Democrats and at Republicans in Congress.
Not his first time going after how the president runs his business or the federal government. All right. Emily, thank you. CalMatters, a nonpartisan news organization explaining California policies and politics. Find their work at CalMatters.org. You can also sign up for Emily's newsletter there.